The jungle breathes around him. Every shadow moves. Every sound could mean death. Lieutenant Samuel Guerrilla lies face down in muddy water, his body pressed against rotting leaves. Japanese voices echo through the trees, close, too close. Search dogs bark somewhere to his left. He can hear the soldiers' boots squelching through the swamp, methodically sweeping the area. Guerrilla hasn't eaten in 4 days. His body weighs 98 pounds. Before the war, he was 170. Malaria burns through his blood. Dysentery has turned his insides to liquid. Every muscle in his body screams for rest. But he doesn't move. He doesn't breathe. He waits. The boots pass within 3 feet of his hiding spot. Guerrilla watches a Japanese soldier's leg move past his face, so close he could reach out and touch it. The soldier pauses. Guerrilla's heart hammers against the earth. One sound, one movement, one mistake, and he's dead. The soldier moves on. Guerrilla waits another hour before lifting his head from the water. When he finally moves, his joints crack like breaking branches. He's been motionless for 6 hours, but he's alive. And tonight, he'll kill again. This is April 1943, the Philippines, and Guerrilla is one of 10 American prisoners who just did the impossible. They escaped from Davao Penal Colony, the most brutal Japanese prison camp in the Pacific. But escaping was just the beginning of their story. What happened next would terrify the Japanese military and inspire a legend that still echoes through special forces training today. These men didn't run to safety. They didn't hide. They became something the Japanese had never seen before, American guerrilla fighters with nothing left to lose. And they were about to become the most lethal soldiers the Pacific War had ever known. If you want to see how broken prisoners became unstoppable killers, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this story with more people. And subscribe to World War II Ember. We're bringing you the forgotten stories that Hollywood won't touch. Now let's go back to the beginning, to the moment when everything went wrong. December 8, 1941, Clark Field, Philippines. Captain William Dyess stands beside his P-40 Warhawk fighter plane, watching the horizon. He's 25 years old, a hotshot pilot from Texas with a cocky grin and hands that never shake. He graduated top of his class from flight school. He's flown more than 500 hours. He's ready for war. 9 hours ago, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. The news reached the Philippines at dawn. Every American pilot at Clark Field has been on high alert since, waiting for orders, waiting for the Japanese to come. Dyess looks at his watch. It's 12:20 p.m. His stomach growls. He hasn't eaten since breakfast. "Think they're coming?" his wingman asks. Dyess shrugs. "They hit Pearl, they'll hit us." "When?" "Soon." The word is barely out of his mouth when someone screams, "Incoming." Dyess looks up. The sky is full of them. 54 Japanese bombers flying in perfect formation, glinting like silver crosses against the noon sun. Behind them, 50 more, Zero fighters, diving toward the airfield like angry wasps. Dyess runs for his plane. Other pilots are running too, scrambling across the tarmac trying to reach their fighters before the bombs hit. But they're too late, way too late. The first bomb lands on the runway with a sound like the earth splitting open. The second hits a fuel depot. The explosion creates a mushroom cloud that rises 300 feet into the air. Then the bombs fall like rain, 20, 30, 40 impacts, each one tearing apart hangars, destroying planes, killing men. Dyess reaches his P-40. He's climbing into the cockpit when a Zero fighter screams overhead, machine guns chattering. Bullets punch through the aircraft's fuselage like it's made of paper. Dyess throws himself flat on the wing as rounds rip through the space where his body had been a second earlier. The attack lasts 18 minutes. When it's over, Clark Field is a smoking graveyard. Every P-40 has been destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Hangars burn. Fuel dumps burn. The runway looks like the surface of the moon, cratered, broken, unusable. Dyess walks through the wreckage in a daze. His plane, his beautiful, deadly P-40, is a twisted pile of metal. He touches the bullet holes in the fuselage, feeling the sharp edges of torn aluminum. Around him, men scream. Medics run between the flames, pulling wounded soldiers from burning buildings. The smoke is so thick Dyess can barely see 20 feet in front of him. In 18 minutes, American air power in the Philippines has been annihilated. Dyess doesn't know it yet, but his war as a pilot is over. His war as an infantryman is about to begin, and that war will break him in ways he can't imagine. But first, he has to survive. January 1943, Bataan Peninsula. Captain Dyess crouches in a foxhole, gripping a rifle he barely knows how to use. He's a pilot. He's trained to fly, not to fight in trenches. But there are no planes left to fly, so now he's an infantry officer commanding Filipino and American troops who are starving to death. The rations have been cut again. Every soldier gets 12 ounces of food per day. That's it, 12 ounces. A can of corned beef split between 3 men. Rice mixed with weevils and gravel. Dyess has lost 40 pounds in 6 weeks. His uniform hangs off him like a tent. But the weight loss is nothing compared to the disease. Malaria infects 90% of the troops. Dysentery is universal. Men collapse mid-battle, too weak to hold their rifles. Some die in their foxholes, and their bodies aren't discovered for days because nobody has the strength to check on them. And still they fight. The Japanese attack every day. Artillery pounds the American positions from dawn to dusk. Infantry charges follow, waves of Japanese soldiers screaming "Banzai" as they rush the American lines. Sometimes the Americans stop them, sometimes they don't. Dyess watches a Japanese artillery shell land 30 yards from his position. The explosion throws a Filipino soldier into the air like a rag doll. The man lands hard, screaming, clutching at his stomach where his intestines are spilling out onto the dirt. 2 soldiers run to help him. There's nothing they can do. The man dies screaming, begging for his mother in Tagalog. Dyess closes his eyes. He's seen this happen 17 times in the last month. 17 men dying in agony while he watches, unable to help, unable to do anything except survive another hour, another day. That night, an officer comes to Dyess's foxhole with orders. "We're surrendering," the officer says quietly. Dyess stares at him. "What?" "MacArthur evacuated to Australia. Wainwright's negotiating surrender terms with the Japanese. It's over." "When?" "Tomorrow, April 9th. Get your men ready." The officer walks away, moving down the line to tell other units. Dyess sits in his foxhole staring at nothing. 3 months of fighting, 3 months of watching men die, 3 months of starvation and disease and bombardment. For nothing. Tomorrow he'll surrender. Tomorrow he'll become a prisoner of war. And tomorrow his nightmare will truly begin. April 10th, 1942, Mariveles, Bataan. 76,000 Filipino and American soldiers stand in the blazing sun, surrounded by Japanese troops with fixed bayonets. Some men cry. Most stand silent, too exhausted for emotion. They've been standing for 6 hours without water, waiting for orders. Dyess stands with his men, squinting against the sun. His canteen is empty. His lips are cracked and bleeding. Around him, men are collapsing from heat stroke, dropping like stones onto the dirt road. A Japanese officer walks down the line, speaking through a translator. "You will march to Camp O'Donnell, 70 miles. You will receive water and food when you arrive. Anyone who cannot keep pace will be left behind." Left behind. The words hang in the air like a threat. The march begins at noon, the hottest part of the day. 76,000 men, strung out along a narrow road, moving north through the sweltering heat. The pace is brutal, 4 miles per hour, no brakes, no water. Men start collapsing within the first hour. Dyess sees a Filipino soldier stumble, fall to his knees, try to stand. A Japanese guard walks over, casually, and drives his bayonet through the man's back. The soldier falls forward and doesn't move. The guard pulls out his bayonet, wipes the blood on the dead man's shirt, and walks back to his position. No one helps the dead man. No one even looks at him. Everyone keeps marching. By the end of the first day, the road is lined with bodies. Men who collapsed from exhaustion, men who asked for water and were shot, men who tried to help others and were bayoneted. The Japanese leave the bodies where they fall as a warning. Dyess marches in a fog of pain. His feet are bleeding. His legs feel like they're made of broken glass. Thirst is a living thing inside him, consuming every thought, every breath. He fantasizes about water, cold water, clean water, a river where he could drink until his stomach explodes. On the second day, they pass a stream. The water is muddy and stagnant, but men break formation and run toward it, desperate, throwing themselves into the water, scooping it into their mouths with cupped hands. The Japanese guards open fire. Machine guns tear through the crowd. Men die in the water, their blood turning the stream red. The survivors scramble back onto the road, wet and terrified. Dyess doesn't run for the water. He learned his lesson yesterday when he saw 10 men shot for breaking formation. He marches. He keeps his head down. He survives. That night they sleep on the side of the road. No food, no water, just dirt and darkness and the sounds of men dying around him. Dyess closes his eyes and tries to remember what it felt like to be human. The march takes 6 days. 65 miles of hell in temperatures that reach 110 degrees. Men die every hour, some from disease, some from exhaustion. Some are executed for moving too slowly, for asking for help, for no reason at all except that a Japanese guard felt like killing someone that day. By the time they reach Camp O'Donnell, approximately 650 Americans are dead. 10,000 Filipinos are dead. The survivors are walking skeletons, delirious with thirst and hunger, many of them dying even as they stumble through the camp gates. Dyess is one of the survivors, barely. He weighs 132 pounds now, down from 185. He can count every rib in his chest. His eyes are sunken deep into his skull. He looks like a corpse that forgot to die. But he's alive, and somewhere, buried beneath the starvation and exhaustion and trauma, a small flame of rage is beginning to burn. Camp O'Donnell, April 1942. The camp is a rectangular plot of barren earth surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. Inside the wire are bamboo barracks, long, open structures with no walls, just a roof and a dirt floor. Each barrack is designed to hold 40 men. The Japanese pack 200 men into each one. Dyess stumbles into his assigned barrack and collapses onto the dirt. Around him, men lie motionless, too weak to move, too sick to care. The smell is overwhelming, human waste, rotting flesh, the sweet-sick odor of gangrenous wounds. A man near Dyess is dying. Dysentery has turned his bowels to liquid. He lies in his own filth, shivering with fever, calling for water that no one can bring him. His voice gets weaker throughout the night. By morning, he's silent. No one moves the body. There's a latrine detail that comes through each morning to collect the dead, dragging them out of the barracks and stacking them like cordwood near the camp entrance. 20 to 30 bodies every morning, sometimes more. Dyess watches this for a week before his mind starts to accept it as normal. Death isn't shocking anymore, it's routine. Men die, bodies are removed, new prisoners arrive, they die. The cycle continues. The water situation is catastrophic. There's one water spigot for 8,000 prisoners. Men wait in line for 6 hours just to fill a canteen. Many collapse while waiting. The Japanese guards don't allow anyone to help them. The bodies are dragged away. The line keeps moving. Food is equally scarce. The rations consist of rice mixed with rocks and insects, served twice a day. Each man receives approximately 8 ounces per meal. That's it. 16 ounces of contaminated rice per day for men who need 3,000 calories just to survive. Dyess does the math. At this rate of starvation, a healthy man will die in approximately 90 days. But most prisoners aren't healthy. They're already weakened by the death march, already infected with malaria and dysentery. They're dying faster. 30 men per day in Dyess's barrack alone. Multiply that across the entire camp. 400 deaths per day, more than 15,000 deaths in the first 3 months. Dyess starts keeping count, scratching marks into the bamboo floor of his barrack. 1 mark per day, 1 mark per friend who dies. The marks multiply faster than he can count them. But Dyess doesn't die. His body clings to life with a stubbornness that surprises even him. He survives the malaria. He survives the dysentery. He survives infections that kill stronger men. He doesn't know why. Luck, maybe. Genetics. Or maybe his body knows something his mind doesn't, that giving up means dying, and dying means the Japanese win. And Dyess refuses to let them win. October 1942, Camp O'Donnell. The Japanese announce a transfer. 2,000 American prisoners will be moved to Davao Penal Colony on the island of Mindanao. The journey will take 4 days by ship and train. Conditions at Davao, they're told, will be better. More food, better sanitation, work details instead of sitting in barracks waiting to die. Dyess doesn't believe a word of it, but he volunteers anyway. Anything is better than O'Donnell, even another death camp. The journey south is a blur of pain and motion. The prisoners are packed into the cargo hold of a rusty freighter, standing room only, no ventilation, no toilets. Men urinate and defecate where they stand. The smell is beyond description. Some men go insane, screaming and clawing at the walls until the guards come down and beat them unconscious. Dyess stands in one spot for 48 hours straight, his legs locked, his mind empty. He's learned how to turn off his brain, how to exist without thinking, without feeling. It's the only way to survive. When the ship finally docks at Davao, the prisoners are herded onto trucks and driven inland. Dyess gets his first look at Mindanao through the truck's slats, jungle, thick and green and endless, stretching to the horizon. Mountains in the distance, their peaks hidden by clouds. Beautiful, he thinks, and then he thinks escape. Because unlike Luzon, where they'd been imprisoned before, Mindanao is different. The island is huge, mostly jungle, with Japanese garrisons spread thin across the interior. The local Filipino population is sympathetic to Americans, and somewhere in those mountains, Dyess has heard rumors of guerrilla fighters, Filipino soldiers who refuse to surrender, who are still fighting the Japanese. If a man could escape the camp and survive in the jungle for even a few days, he might reach the guerrillas, and if he reached the guerrillas, he could fight again. The thought lodges in Dyess's brain like a splinter. Escape, fight, kill the bastards who did this to him. He doesn't share the thought with anyone, not yet, but it grows in his mind, feeding on his rage, building strength from his hatred. Davao Penal Colony turns out to be exactly what the name suggests, an old prison farm converted into a POW camp. The prisoners work in the fields, planting rice and vegetables, harvesting coconuts, raising pigs and chickens. The work is brutal, 12 hours a day in 100-degree heat, but the food is marginally better than O'Donnell. Dyess gains 15 pounds in the first month. His mind clears, his body strengthens, and the more he heals, the more the idea of escape consumes him. He starts paying attention to details, the guard rotations, the perimeter fence, the drainage ditches that run beneath the wire. He notes which guards are lazy, which are vigilant, which can be bribed with cigarettes or food. He's not the only one thinking about escape. Other prisoners are having the same idea. The problem is the reprisal policy. The Japanese have made it clear, if prisoners escape, 10 others will be executed in retaliation. 10 innocent men will die for every one man who runs. It's a brutal calculus designed to discourage escapes by making them morally impossible. But Dyess does the math differently. Men are dying anyway, 30 per month from disease and starvation, even with the marginally better conditions at Davao. In a year, 360 men will die just from sitting here. But if he escapes and fights, if he kills Japanese soldiers, disrupts their operations, provides intelligence to Allied forces, he might save more lives than he costs. And the 10 men who are executed in reprisal, they were already dying. At least their deaths would have meaning. It's cold logic, ruthless logic, but Dyess has been through hell, and hell burns away everything except the brutal truths. He starts recruiting others, quietly, carefully, men who think the same way he does, men who would rather die fighting than die sitting in a barracks. By March 1943, he has 9 others, 9 men willing to risk everything for a chance to fight back. They name the operation Exit. The date is set for April 4th, exactly 1 year after the fall of Bataan, but logistics force a delay. The new date is April 9th. 1 year to the day after Bataan fell. The symbolism is perfect. April 9th, 1943, 2:15 a.m., Davao Penal Colony. The night is black, moonless, perfect for what they're about to do. Captain Dyess lies flat in his barrack, fully dressed, waiting for the signal. Around him, 200 men pretend to sleep. Most of them know what's about to happen. None of them will stop it. At 2:30, a prisoner near the door coughs twice. The signal. Dyess rises silently and moves toward the back of the barrack where 9 other men are already waiting. They don't speak. They've rehearsed this moment 50 times in whispers and hand signals. Single file, they slip out the back of the barrack and move through the shadows toward the eastern perimeter fence. The nearest guard tower is 60 yards away. Dyess can see the guard silhouetted against the night sky, smoking a cigarette, looking the other direction. They reach the drainage ditch exactly where they expected it to be, a concrete culvert that runs beneath the fence, carrying rainwater out of the camp. The opening is narrow, maybe 2 feet across. Dyess goes first. The culvert is full of stagnant water and mud. Dyess slides into it on his belly, feeling the cold water soak through his clothes. The tunnel is completely dark. He can't see his hand in front of his face. He crawls forward, pulling himself through the muck with his elbows, pushing with his legs. The tunnel is only 20 feet long, but it feels like 20 miles. Dyess's heart pounds so hard he can hear it echoing off the concrete walls. If a guard looks down right now, if someone spots them, they're dead. All of them. But no alarm sounds, no shots ring out. Dyess emerges from the far end of the culvert and finds himself outside the fence, lying in elephant grass 6 feet tall. He rolls to the side and watches the fence. One by one, the other 9 men slide out of the tunnel and disappear into the grass. They wait 5 minutes, making sure no alarm has been raised. The camp behind them is silent. The guard in the tower is still smoking, still looking the other direction. Dyess signals with his hand, "Move." The 10 men scatter into the jungle in different directions, exactly as planned. No one stays together. Traveling in pairs or groups makes them easier to track. Alone, they have a better chance. Dyess runs north, moving through the jungle as fast as he dares, putting distance between himself and the camp. He runs for 20 minutes before stopping to catch his breath. His heart races, his hands shake, but he's outside the wire. He's free. Behind him, Davao Penal Colony sleeps. The guards won't discover the escape until morning roll call at 5 a.m. By then, Dyess will be miles away, deep in the jungle, impossible to find. He allows himself one moment of pure joy, a grin, fierce and wild, splitting his face. Then he starts moving again, north toward the mountains, toward the guerrillas, toward war. The Japanese discover the escape at 5:17 a.m., 18 minutes late for morning roll call. The camp commandant goes ballistic. Search teams are organized immediately, guard dogs, tracking units, 50 soldiers sweeping through the jungle. The commandant also sends word to local Filipino villages. Any civilian who helps the escaped prisoners will be executed along with their entire family. It's a threat designed to cut off the Americans' only potential source of help. But the threat doesn't work as well as the Japanese hope. Many Filipinos hate the Japanese occupiers more than they fear death. And in the mountains, the guerrillas are waiting. At 9 a.m., in accordance with the reprisal policy, 10 American prisoners are dragged from their barracks and executed by firing squad in the center of the camp. The remaining prisoners are forced to watch. The executed men die bravely. One of them, a sergeant from California, spits at the firing squad before they shoot him. His last words are, "I hope they make it." They, the 10 men who escaped, the 10 men who gave these prisoners a reason to die with pride instead of despair. In the jungle, Dyess hears the gunfire. He knows exactly what it means. 10 men just died because of his decision. 10 good men who did nothing wrong except exist in the same camp where he chose to escape. He should feel guilty. He should feel crushing shame. Instead, he feels rage. Pure, incandescent fury at the Japanese who created this system, who forced this choice, who made escape a death sentence for innocent men. That rage will keep him alive, and it will make him lethal. April 13, 1943, 4 days after the escape. Dyess has been moving through the jungle continuously, sleeping in 2-hour intervals, eating nothing. His stomach is a knot of hunger. His lips are cracked from dehydration. He's found water, streams and pools where he drinks until he can't hold anymore. But food is impossible. He doesn't know which plants are edible. He tried eating something that looked like a banana 2 days ago and spent 4 hours vomiting. He's also lost. He's been moving generally north, using the sun and stars to navigate, but the jungle all looks the same: trees, vines, undergrowth so thick he has to cut through it with his hands. He has no idea where he is or where he's going. But he's alive, that's what matters. On the 4th day, as he's pushing through a particularly dense section of jungle, he hears voices. Male voices speaking Tagalog, Filipinos. Dyess freezes, listening. He can't see them, but they sound close, maybe 50 yards ahead, moving through the jungle toward him. This is the moment that will determine everything. If these are Japanese collaborators, he's dead. If they're guerrillas or sympathetic civilians, he might survive. Dyess makes a decision. He steps into a small clearing and raises his hands above his head, making himself visible. "American," he shouts in English. "American soldier, I escaped from Davao." The voices go silent. Dyess stands in the clearing, hands up, waiting. Every second feels like an hour. Then 3 Filipino men step out of the jungle. They're armed with rifles, old bolt-action weapons, probably from the pre-war Philippine army. They point the rifles at Dyess, examining him with hard, suspicious eyes. One of them speaks English. "You escaped from the Japanese." "4 days ago," Dyess says. "Me and 9 others. I'm trying to reach the guerrillas." The Filipino men exchange glances. One of them says something in Tagalog. The English speaker nods and lowers his rifle slightly. "You're lucky," he says. "We are the guerrillas, and you look like you need food." Dyess nearly collapses with relief. "Yes, please." The guerrillas take him to their camp, a hidden settlement deep in the mountains, invisible from the air, accessible only by narrow trails that wind through the jungle. The camp consists of bamboo huts, cooking fires, and approximately 60 fighters, Filipino soldiers, farmers, teenagers, even a few women. The guerrilla commander is a former Philippine army captain named Claro Loretta. He's 35 years old, short and compact, with intelligent eyes and a handshake that could crush bones. He interviews Dyess for 2 hours, asking detailed questions about his background, his escape, his knowledge of Japanese operations. Dyess answers everything honestly. He has nothing to hide and nothing to lose. Finally, Loretta makes his decision. "You can stay, but you work. We need every fighter we can get." "I'll work," Dyess says. "I'll fight, that's why I escaped." Loretta nods slowly. "Good, because the Japanese are bastards and we're going to kill as many as we can before this war ends. Are you ready for that?" Dyess thinks about the Bataan Death March, the executions at O'Donnell, the 10 men shot in reprisal for his escape. The rage that's been burning in his chest for a year flares hotter. "I'm ready," he says. The guerrillas give Dyess a bamboo hut, a sleeping mat, and all the rice he can eat. For the first 3 days, he does nothing but sleep and eat. His body is so depleted that even walking across the camp exhausts him. But gradually, he recovers. The rice puts weight back on his frame. A Filipino medic treats his malaria with quinine tablets smuggled from a Japanese supply depot. The infections in his feet and legs slowly heal. By the end of May, 2 weeks after arriving at the guerrilla camp, Dyess weighs 145 pounds. He's not fully recovered. His ribs still show, his arms are stick-thin, but he's functional. He can walk without pain. He can think clearly, and he's hungry for payback. Loretta assigns Dyess to train a guerrilla squad in infantry tactics. The squad consists of 20 men, mostly farmers with no military experience. They're brave and motivated, but they don't know how to fight. They don't know how to move under fire, how to use cover, how to coordinate fire and maneuver. Dyess teaches them everything he learned on Bataan: small unit tactics, fire discipline, how to set up an ambush, how to conduct a hasty withdrawal, how to kill quickly and efficiently, then disappear before the enemy can respond. He's a good teacher, patient but demanding. He runs the squad through drills until they can execute basic maneuvers without thinking. He teaches them to shoot accurately instead of spraying bullets wildly. He shows them how to use the terrain to their advantage, how to make themselves invisible even in broad daylight. The training takes 6 weeks. By mid-July, Dyess's squad is ready for combat. They're not elite soldiers. They don't have the equipment or experience for that, but they're competent. They know how to fight. And more importantly, they're angry. The Japanese occupation has devastated Mindanao. Villages burned, civilians executed, women raped. The guerrillas have seen their friends and families murdered by Japanese soldiers who treat Filipinos as subhuman. These men don't need motivation. They need direction, and Dyess gives them that. Loretta approves the squad for operations. The first mission is simple: ambush a Japanese patrol on the coastal road between Davao and Cotabato. The patrol consists of approximately 12 soldiers traveling in a truck. The mission objective is to kill the soldiers, capture their weapons, and withdraw before reinforcements arrive. Dyess spends 3 days planning the ambush. He scouts the road, identifies the perfect location, a narrow section where the road passes through dense jungle, and positions his squad on both sides of the road, creating an L-shaped ambush. Each man knows his role. Each man knows his fields of fire. Each man knows the withdrawal route. On July 19, 1943, they execute the ambush. The Japanese truck appears at 2 p.m., moving slowly along the rutted road. Dyess waits until the truck is centered in the kill zone, then fires the first shot, a rifle round that punches through the windshield and kills the driver. The truck swerves and crashes into a ditch. The guerrillas open fire from both sides, pouring bullets into the vehicle. Japanese soldiers bail out of the back, trying to find cover, trying to return fire. They don't have a chance. The ambush is perfect. The guerrillas have clear fields of fire. The Japanese are caught in the open, silhouetted against the road. The firefight lasts 90 seconds. 12 Japanese soldiers lie dead or dying on the road. 0 guerrilla casualties. Dyess orders his men to strip the bodies of weapons and ammunition. They recover 12 rifles, 3 pistols, ammunition, and supplies. Everything is loaded into the Japanese truck, which is still operational despite the crash. The guerrillas drive the truck into the jungle, conceal it, and disappear. Total time from first shot to complete withdrawal, 4 minutes. Dyess stands in the jungle afterward, his hands shaking with adrenaline, staring at the rifle he just used to kill 2 men. He feels no remorse, no guilt, just a cold satisfaction. 2 Japanese soldiers dead, 45 more to go before he equals what they did to him. He's just getting started. Over the next 6 months, Dyess transforms into something the Japanese have never encountered before: an American guerrilla fighter with professional military training and a personal vendetta. He conducts 23 combat operations between July 1943 and January 1944. Ambushes, raids, assassinations. Every operation follows the same pattern: meticulous planning, overwhelming firepower at the point of contact, and immediate withdrawal before the Japanese can respond. His kill count rises steadily: 2 kills in the first ambush, 3 in the second, 5 in the third. By September, he's personally killed 18 Japanese soldiers. By December, the number reaches 34. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. What makes Dyess so effective isn't just his skill as a fighter, it's his understanding of guerrilla warfare principles. He never fights unless he has the advantage. He chooses the time and place of every engagement. He only attacks isolated units, small patrols, convoys, outposts with minimal security. He never hits the same target twice. He never stays in one area long enough for the Japanese to predict his movements. And he teaches these principles to every guerrilla fighter he trains. Within 6 months, Dyess has trained more than 200 Filipino guerrillas. These men go on to form their own squads, conducting their own operations, killing their own Japanese soldiers. The effect multiplies. One American trainer creates 10 guerrilla leaders. Those 10 leaders create 100 fighters. Those 100 fighters kill thousands of Japanese soldiers over the course of the war. But Dyess's greatest contribution isn't the direct casualties he inflicts. It's the psychological impact. The Japanese soldiers on Mindanao are terrified of the guerrillas. They call them white ghosts because American fighters seem to appear from nowhere, kill with ruthless efficiency, and vanish before anyone can respond. Japanese soldiers stop traveling alone. They increase security patrols. They impose brutal reprisals on Filipino villages suspected of supporting guerrillas. But nothing works. The attacks continue, the ambushes continue, and the fear spreads. By the end of 1943, the Japanese have approximately 10,000 troops on Mindanao. 2,000 of those troops are dedicated entirely to anti-guerrilla operations instead of defending against a potential American invasion. That's 2,000 soldiers who are effectively neutralized, tied down chasing ghosts through the jungle. And it's all because one escaped prisoner decided to fight instead of hide. Dyess isn't the only escaped prisoner who becomes a guerrilla fighter. Of the 10 men who escaped from Davao on April 9th, 7 survived to reach guerrilla forces. Each one follows a similar path: recovery, training, combat operations, killing Japanese soldiers. Lieutenant Commander Melvin McCoy, a Navy officer, joins a coastal guerrilla group and specializes in small boat raids against Japanese naval vessels. McCoy leads 11 operations over 6 months, personally killing 16 Japanese sailors and destroying 2 patrol boats. He becomes known for his absolutely cold tactical judgment. He never takes unnecessary risks, never attacks unless victory is certain, never loses a man. Major Stephen Melnick, an Army intelligence officer, becomes a guerrilla intelligence coordinator. He doesn't conduct as many direct combat operations as Dyess or McCoy, but his intelligence network is invaluable. Melnick organizes Filipino civilians to gather information about Japanese troop movements, supply routes, and defensive positions. This intelligence is transmitted to Allied forces in Australia via clandestine radio. Melnick's intelligence network is credited with providing targeting data for multiple airstrikes that destroy Japanese ammunition depots, fuel storage, and transportation infrastructure. The intelligence indirectly causes thousands of Japanese casualties. Lieutenant Samuel Gracio, the pilot who we met at the beginning of this story, becomes a guerrilla scout and sniper. Gracio is smaller and lighter than most fighters, which makes him perfect for reconnaissance missions deep into Japanese-controlled territory. He conducts 37 reconnaissance missions and participates in 14 ambushes. His confirmed kill count is 11, but the actual number is probably higher because Gracio often operates alone and doesn't always report his kills. Each escaped prisoner develops his own specialty based on his skills and personality, but they all share common characteristics. They're professionals. They have military training and combat experience. They're motivated by revenge. They've seen their comrades die in Japanese prison camps. They've been starved, beaten, and humiliated. They have scores to settle. They have nothing to lose. They've already been through hell. Death doesn't scare them anymore. And these characteristics make them absolutely lethal. By the end of 1943, the 7 escaped prisoners from Davao have collectively killed approximately 120 Japanese soldiers in direct combat operations. They've trained more than 400 Filipino guerrillas. They've provided intelligence that led to dozens of airstrikes and naval bombardments. They've become a nightmare for the Japanese occupation forces. But in November 1943, their war as guerrillas ends abruptly. Orders arrive from guerrilla headquarters directing all American officers to proceed to the coast for evacuation to Australia. The U.S. military wants first-hand accounts of Japanese atrocities in the prison camps. Dyess, McCoy, and Melnick are specifically ordered to return to Allied lines for debriefing. Dyess doesn't want to go. He argues with the guerrilla commander, insisting that his skills are needed in the Philippines. But orders are orders. He's still a U.S. Army officer, and U.S. Army officers follow orders. On November 15, 1943, Dyess, McCoy, and Melnick are evacuated from Mindanao aboard the submarine USS Narwhal. They leave behind the guerrilla units they trained, the Filipinos they fought beside, and the war they'd been winning. As the submarine slips beneath the dark water and turns toward Australia, Dyess stands on the deck for one last look at Mindanao. Somewhere in those mountains, Filipino guerrillas are preparing for their next ambush. Somewhere in those jungles, Japanese soldiers are dying. And Dyess isn't there to see it. It feels like losing the war all over again. January 1944, Washington, D.C. Captain William Dyess sits in a conference room at the War Department, facing a panel of Army intelligence officers and stenographers. He's wearing a clean uniform that hangs loose on his still thin frame. He's gained weight since leaving the Philippines, but he still looks like a skeleton compared to his pre-war photographs. The intelligence officers want to know everything. The Bataan Death March, Camp O'Donnell, Davao, the executions, the starvation, the disease, the systematic brutality. Dyess tells them everything. He speaks in a flat, emotionless voice, reciting facts and statistics, describing atrocities with clinical precision. He doesn't editorialize. He doesn't add drama. He just reports what he saw. The intelligence officers take notes. The stenographers transcribe every word. Nobody interrupts. Nobody asks him to slow down. They just listen as Dyess describes 3 years of hell in 60 minutes of testimony. When he finishes, the senior officer thanks him and tells him his testimony will be classified. The War Department doesn't want to publicize Japanese atrocities because it might provoke retaliation against prisoners still held in Japanese camps. Dyess nods. He understands the logic, but he also thinks it's wrong. Americans should know what the Japanese are doing. They should know what their soldiers are suffering. They should be angry enough to win this war. But he's a soldier. He follows orders. His testimony goes into a classified file, and he's assigned to public affairs duties, war bond rallies, radio interviews, carefully censored speeches about his experiences. Dyess hates every minute of it. He's not a public speaker. He's a fighter pilot and a guerrilla warrior. He belongs in a cockpit or in the jungle, not standing on a stage in front of cameras. But something changes in January 1944. A journalist obtains portions of Dyess's classified testimony and publishes them in a series of newspaper articles. The public reaction is explosive. Americans are outraged. The Bataan Death March becomes front-page news. Photographs of emaciated prisoners circulate in magazines. The War Department is forced to declassify additional testimony from Dyess, McCoy, and Melnick. Suddenly, everyone knows what happened in the Philippines, and everyone wants revenge. The publicity makes Dyess uncomfortable. He never wanted to be famous. He just wanted to kill Japanese soldiers and avenge his dead comrades. But now he's a national hero, giving speeches, shaking hands with politicians, posing for photographs. He requests reassignment to a combat unit. Multiple times, each request is denied. The War Department wants him in Washington, where he can continue to generate publicity and support for the war effort. Finally, in December 1944, his request is approved. Dyess is assigned to a P-38 Lightning fighter squadron based in California, training for deployment to the Pacific. He'll fly combat missions again. He'll kill Japanese soldiers from the air instead of the ground. It's not guerrilla warfare, but it's close enough. He never gets the chance. December 22, 1944, Burbank, California. Captain Dyess takes off in a P-38 Lightning for a routine test flight. The aircraft is brand new, straight from the factory, and Dyess is evaluating its performance before the squadron deploys overseas. At 3:47 p.m., approximately 15 minutes into the flight, witnesses on the ground see the P-38 lose altitude rapidly. The aircraft is trailing smoke from the left engine. Dyess is trying to make an emergency landing at the airfield, but he's losing altitude too fast. The P-38 crashes into an open field half a mile short of the runway. The impact is catastrophic. The aircraft explodes on contact, creating a fireball that rises 200 feet into the air. Emergency crews reach the crash site within minutes. There's nothing they can do. Dyess is dead. His body is so badly burned that identification is only possible through dental records. He was 27 years old. The investigation later determines that the P-38's left engine suffered a mechanical failure, a defective fuel line that caused the engine to catch fire. Dyess had tried to land the aircraft with one engine, but he'd been too low and too slow to make it to the runway. It was a random mechanical failure, bad luck, a defective part that slipped through quality control. After everything Dyess had survived, the Death March, the prison camps, the escape, 6 months of guerrilla warfare, he died in a training accident on a sunny afternoon in California, killed by a broken fuel line. The irony is crushing. William Dyess was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. He was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions as a guerrilla leader on Mindanao. The citation specifically noted his exceptional leadership, tactical skill, and the significant enemy casualties he inflicted during 6 months of operations. In 1956, the Air Force named a base in his honor, Dyess Air Force Base in Abilene, Texas. The base remains active today as a training facility for cargo aircraft crews. A memorial at the entrance describes Dyess's service: pilot, prisoner of war, escapee, guerrilla fighter, American hero. But Dyess's real legacy isn't the air base or the medals or the ceremonies. His legacy is measured in the lives he saved and the enemy soldiers he killed. The guerrilla battalion Dyess trained and led continued fighting after his evacuation. Between November 1943 and the liberation of the Philippines in July 1945, that battalion conducted more than 200 combat operations. Conservative estimates credit the unit with killing at least 400 Japanese soldiers and wounding or capturing hundreds more. Many of the tactics used by that battalion, L-shaped ambushes, rapid withdrawal procedures, intelligence gathering methods, were taught by Dyess. He created a template for guerrilla operations that proved devastatingly effective against the Japanese. Commander McCoy and Major Melnick also survived the war. McCoy remained in the Navy and retired as a captain in 1962. He wrote a memoir titled 10 Escape from Tojo, describing his escape from Davao and his experiences as a guerrilla fighter. He died in 1976 at age 66. Melnick remained in the Army and retired as a colonel in 1954. His memoir, Philippine Diary, provided detailed intelligence about Japanese operations and Filipino resistance networks. He died in 1989 at age 83. Lieutenant Samuel Gracio also survived. After his evacuation from the Philippines, he returned to flight duty and flew combat missions over Japan in 1945. He remained in the Air Force after the war and retired as a colonel in 1961. He wrote his own memoir, Return to Freedom, which described his escape and guerrilla operations in vivid detail. He died in 2004 at age 89, one of the last surviving Davao escapees. The other 4 escaped prisoners who survived to join guerrilla forces also made it through the war. Some were evacuated to Australia and returned to regular military service. Others remained with guerrilla units until the liberation of the Philippines. All of them killed Japanese soldiers during their time as guerrillas. All of them survived. In total, the 7 Davao escapees who reached guerrilla forces are credited with approximately 200 confirmed enemy kills through direct combat operations. They trained more than 600 Filipino guerrillas. They provided intelligence that led to dozens of successful airstrikes and naval bombardments. They tied down thousands of Japanese troops in anti-guerrilla operations. 7 men, 200 confirmed kills, thousands of Japanese casualties indirectly attributed to their training and intelligence work. The impact per capita is extraordinary. Regular infantry soldiers in the Pacific Theater averaged approximately 2.3 enemy kills over the entire course of the war. The escaped prisoners averaged more than 28 kills each in less than 2 years of operations. They were 12 times more effective than conventional infantry. And the reason is simple. Guerrilla warfare favored the attacker, and these men had both the training and the motivation to exploit that advantage ruthlessly. But the Davao escapees weren't unique. Approximately 500 American soldiers escaped from Japanese prison camps in the Philippines between 1942 and 1944. Of those 500, approximately 350 survived to join guerrilla forces. Those 350 men killed an estimated 4,100 Japanese soldiers during guerrilla operations. That's an average of 11.7 kills per man over an average service period of 24 months. 5 times more effective than regular infantry. These numbers are staggering, but they make sense when you understand the psychology of these fighters. They weren't ordinary soldiers. They were men who had been broken and rebuilt. They'd survived starvation, disease, torture, and abuse. They'd watched their comrades die in front of them. They'd been reduced to animals, stripped of everything except the will to survive. And then they escaped. And when they escaped, they carried with them a rage so pure and focused that it transformed them into something the Japanese military couldn't comprehend or defeat. They became ghosts, white ghosts who struck from the jungle and disappeared before anyone could respond, white ghosts who killed with cold efficiency and absolute ruthlessness, white ghosts who feared nothing because they'd already been through the worst hell imaginable and come out the other side. The Japanese soldiers on Mindanao feared them. Japanese commanders increased security, imposed brutal reprisals on civilians, and dedicated thousands of troops to hunting the guerrillas. But nothing worked. The attacks continued. The ambushes continued. The deaths continued. By 1944, the Japanese had approximately 250,000 troops in the Philippines. 40,000 of those troops were assigned to anti-guerrilla operations, instead of defending against the American invasion that everyone knew was coming. 40,000 Japanese soldiers, an entire corps, effectively neutralized by guerrilla forces that numbered only 15,000 fighters, many of them poorly trained civilians armed with captured weapons and homemade guns. And leading those guerrillas, training them, fighting beside them, were 350 escaped American prisoners who had absolutely nothing left to lose. When American forces invaded the Philippines in October 1944, the guerrillas were waiting. They'd spent 2 years learning the terrain, mapping Japanese positions, building intelligence networks. When MacArthur returned, as he'd promised he would, the guerrillas turned that knowledge into action. They secured bridges before the Japanese could destroy them. They guided American units through difficult terrain. They ambushed Japanese forces attempting to retreat into the mountains. They provided targeting data for airstrikes and artillery bombardments. The guerrillas didn't win the Philippines campaign. That victory belongs to the American forces who landed at Leyte Gulf and fought their way north to Manila. But the guerrillas made that victory faster, cheaper, and more complete than it would have been otherwise. By July 1945, when the Philippines was declared secure, guerrilla forces had killed an estimated 58,000 Japanese soldiers. That's nearly a quarter of all Japanese casualties in the Philippines campaign. The escaped American prisoners accounted for approximately 7% of total guerrilla kills despite representing less than 2% of total guerrilla manpower. 7% of 58,000 is 4,060 kills. 4,000 Japanese soldiers killed by 350 escaped prisoners. That's the final accounting. That's the price the Japanese paid for brutality, for the death march, for the prison camps, for the systematic murder of prisoners of war. But the legacy of these escaped prisoners extends beyond body counts and casualty statistics. They changed how the U.S. military thinks about prisoners of war. Before World War II, captured soldiers were essentially written off. Once you surrendered, your war was over. You sat in a prison camp and waited for liberation or death. The escaped prisoners in the Philippines proved that assumption wrong. They demonstrated that POWs aren't defeated soldiers. They're soldiers who have been temporarily removed from combat. If they escape, they return to the fight. And they return more dangerous than before because they're driven by experiences that ordinary soldiers never endure. This lesson was incorporated into modern military training. SEER, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape courses now teach soldiers that escape isn't the end of the mission. It's the beginning of a new phase. Escaped soldiers are expected to evade enemy forces, link up with friendly forces or resistance groups, and continue fighting. The example of William Dyess and the other Davao escapees is specifically taught in SEER courses as a model of post-escape operations. Their tactics, their mindset, their ruthless efficiency, all of it has been studied, analyzed, and incorporated into how we train soldiers to survive captivity and return to the fight. That's the real legacy, not the medals or memorials or Air Force bases. The real legacy is the lesson that prisoners of war are never truly defeated as long as they're alive. They can escape, they can fight, they can win. And if you break them badly enough, if you brutalize them and starve them and strip away everything except their will to survive, you create something far more dangerous than an ordinary soldier. You create a ghost, a white ghost who appears from nowhere, kills with cold efficiency, and disappears back into the jungle. You create someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. You create William Dyess. Somewhere in the mountains of Mindanao, there's a clearing where Filipino guerrillas once trained under the supervision of an escaped American prisoner. The clearing is overgrown now, reclaimed by jungle, invisible to anyone who doesn't know it's there. But if you knew where to look, if you pushed through the undergrowth and found that clearing, you might still see the marks, foxhole depressions, fire pits, bullet impacts on trees where men practiced their aim. And maybe, if you stood very still and listened, you might hear the ghosts, American voices teaching Filipino guerrillas how to set up an ambush, Japanese soldiers screaming as they die in a kill zone, the sound of men who refused to accept defeat, who escaped hell and returned to the fight more dangerous than before. That clearing is a monument, not an official one with plaques and ceremonies, but a real one, a place where broken men rebuilt themselves, a place where prisoners became warriors, a place where the impossible became routine and revenge became justice. William Dyess is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. His name is on a memorial at an Air Force base in Texas. His story is told in history books and military training courses. But his real monument is that clearing in the Philippine jungle where he taught farmers to kill professional soldiers, where he transformed terrified civilians into disciplined guerrilla fighters, where he proved that the human spirit, properly motivated, is more dangerous than any weapon. The Japanese tried to break these men. They starved them, beat them, worked them to death. They created a system designed to crush the will to resist, to transform soldiers into obedient slaves who accepted their fate. It didn't work. Instead, they created ghosts, white ghosts who escaped into the jungle and waged a war of pure vengeance. Men who killed not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to, because they had scores to settle and nothing left to lose. And those ghosts killed 4,000 Japanese soldiers before the war ended. 4,000. That's the price of brutality. That's what happens when you break a man badly enough that revenge becomes his only reason to live. You don't create a victim, you create a weapon. And that weapon will keep killing until there's nothing left to kill or nothing left of itself. William Dyess died in a plane crash in 1944, but the guerrilla battalion he created continued fighting until 1945. The tactics he taught continued working. The men he trained continued killing. The ghost lived on. That's the story of the ghost soldiers, American prisoners who escaped hell and became the most lethal fighters the Pacific War ever saw. These men deserve to be remembered. Their courage, their ruthlessness, their refusal to accept defeat, all of it deserves to be taught to every generation that comes after. But stories like this are disappearing. They're buried in archives, forgotten in old documents, lost to time. And that's why World War II Ember exists, to rescue these stories before they vanish forever. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube's algorithm to show this video to more people. Every like rescues this story from obscurity for just a little bit longer. And subscribe to World War II Ember. We're telling forgotten stories every single week. Stories about soldiers who did impossible things. Stories about courage and sacrifice and revenge. Stories that Hollywood won't touch because they're too brutal, too honest, too real. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Because these men, William Dyess, Melvin McCoy, Stephen Melnick, Samuel Gracio, and all the others who escaped and fought and died, they deserve an audience. They deserve to be remembered. And finally, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you think about these ghost soldiers who refuse to stay prisoners. Tell me if you've heard this story before or if it's new to you. Just let me know you're here. Let me know someone's listening. Because that's what keeps these stories alive. Not monuments or memorials, just people who care enough to listen, to remember, to pass the story on. William Dyess and his fellow ghost soldiers paid the ultimate price for their courage. The least we can do is remember their names. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure these men don't disappear into silence. They deserve better than that.